Okay, well, let's get started. We have a really amazing panel. So starting with Bart, who just presented, talking about B Corp, B Lab, and how we can use our business as a force for good. And I want to also introduce Pascal next. He's a former YPO international chairman. He's a guy who's got a lot of us thinking more deeply about impact. So we're deeply thankful that we're impacted by your impact movement. So and also we have Laura Koch, who gave an amazing talk about caring economy and how children are foundation of our societies. And so, you know, our conversations has led me to thinking we gotta organize a parenting conference, global parenting conference, to reach millions of parents worldwide. You know, worldwide, you mentioned there's 30% increase in domestic violence. In Mongolia, it's like 50%, so it's even worse. But you know, really love your passion and insight. And Thomas, you're multi award winning organization for B Corp, as I've been told. Super impressive. Super excited to hear more insights from you. And you know, Nishida, you know, we met last year, but about 10 days ago we had a call, and what a whirlwind. You know, in 2 weeks we became really great friends and made a ton of great connections. You know, I really appreciate how passionate you are about innovation, impact, and also just having so much energy to be able to get everything going. So you're the moderator, but I'll be here to help in any way if you need. And let's get started.
Thank you, Mergen. Thank you so much. I really just want to share that working with Mergen really demonstrates that leadership is absolutely a team sport. And even though we met last year in Mongolia, I think there was too much cashmere and vodka involved for us to have a really meaningful connection. So we're hoping to fix that virtually, because it seems to, you know, lessen the distractions. But without much further ado, I want to start with something that we very often do in YPO and helps us to understand leaders and build trust. So if you guys don't mind, I'd like to start with a little rapid fire icebreaker. Okay, we have been talking about, you know, what does it take to be a positive influencer? What kind of mindset does it take to get up and have that inexhaustible energy, demand? I mean, we've seen Pascal traveling the world. We see him everywhere on Facebook. We're like, how can he be in so many chapters at once? And this was before virtual, right? We see the same thing with Bart. Thomas has been doing it in his business. So has Laura. I'm just dying to know, what do you guys, I'm going to go one by one. I'll call your names. Give me the one attribute that you think is the most important thing for you to be a positive influencer, and what mindset do others need to have? But what's most important to you? Laura, I'll start with you because your smile is so bright today.
Thank you. So many, but I'm going to say one is I truly believe in the SDGs, and SDG 17 is my favorite. That is partnerships. And what really brings forward sustainable, purposeful leaders is the ability to actually embrace partnerships in businesses, meaning connecting with, in your business, being able to do business with NGOs, with governments, with competitors, and basically, the power of partnership is what I define it as 1 + 1 = 11.
Wow, Laura, that is some great math. It's the kind of math that I like to do. Pascal, what about you? What do you think is the biggest distinction for a positive influence mindset?
It's a tough question somehow, right? But I think it's truly going around the world and meeting people that are living their life with compassion, authenticity in everything that they do, and they really inspire the way you drive. I'm absolutely with Laura with regard to the SDG, which is a perfect set of direction, but it's truly what has empowered me is actually the peers and people like you, Nish, and Laura, and Megan that I met in Ulaanbaatar. I think the fuel is actually meeting people that have bigger ideas and the power to scale them.
Wonderful, thank you. So it's ideas, meeting other energetic people, and the thought about how we can work on scaling them. Thomas, you look very pensive thinking about, what is driving that positive leader mindset, but you're very successful in doing that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so I think if I look at what I do, I think I'm almost kind of single dimensional. It's all about people. So what I do mostly is for people. And I think the biggest attribute that I can mention here is empathy. I think I do have this sense of, when I meet people, I really feel for them. I watch them on TV, I feel for them. And so that I think drives the urge to try to do something,
So even when you see people on TV, you feel empathy for them if you don't know them?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the news these days, I mean, they talk about the refugees, about the victims of, domestic violence, about women in places where they have no rights. And you can't help but feel for these people, right?
Of course, no, I think it's very important, but I think in today's 24/7 entertainment, constant TV culture, it's so easy to go from one thing to the other and to very easily forget that, you just saw something absolutely devastating and then, move into your everyday life. So it's great that you think that that's one of the skill sets of having a positive influencer mindset. Thank you, Thomas, for sharing. Bart, I mean, you're the king of encouraging business as a force for good. I know our past international chairman, Pascal, also really loves this tagline. What do you think is the most important thing to have a positive influencer mindset, Bart?
Nishita, one of the joys of my job, probably the thing that keeps me going most is my interaction with all of the entrepreneurs, right? I get to meet thousands every year, entrepreneurs who are trying to use their business as a force for good. And the commonality across all of them, or the greatest commonality, is authenticity. That if you want to embrace the idea of using your business beyond something than just creating private wealth, you have to be authentic about that. And if you are not sharing an authenticity to your community and your workers, it's very hard for them to follow you. And so, without question, what I see amongst the entrepreneurs that we work with is an authentic commitment to using business as a force for good.
Thank you, Bart. Mergen, I'm going to ask you too. What do you think? You've put together this summit and it's just been this like raging success, right? I mean, it's all online and, you were dancing before this and you lost track of time. How do you keep yourself focused on having this positive influencer mindset?
Apparently, it was not focused too much. No, I mean, what do you do when Jerry Wanda, like a 300 album selling multi-Grammy award winner, playing you music, playing you Rihanna, Shakira, and Santana, all these artists he worked with, so lost a little bit of track. I was going to say passion, but then, passion is coming from empathy. So it kind of goes back to what Thomas was saying about empathy, but then maybe it's amplified by authenticity. So, a thought that came to my mind is Dalai Lama's quote about seek first to understand. And I think that maybe goes alongside with empathy. I think that's it. Really, just seeing that there could be more, there could be better, and then being able to relate. And I'm thinking maybe that's the start.
Thank you, Mergen. So you guys have now all heard from all of our panelists and my assistant moderator and host of this wonderful summit as to what they think creates a positive influencer mindset. I'm going to do one more rapid fire round, and I know you guys are all waiting with hot anticipation to find out how can I be more impactful in my life starting right away. And for me, I thought it was just buying Ben and Jerry's ice cream because they were a B corporation. But you know, buying 4 to 17 pints, it's not really taking care of myself. And one of the most important things about being a leader is realizing that you can't lead if you're, you know, high on sugar all the time. So as much as I really want to support them, I do think I have to cut back. Laura, back to you, because we started with you first. The question this time is, if you could say one thing that businesses should start doing, stop doing, or accelerate, what would you choose? What would you recommend overall? Start, stop, or accelerate? You're on mute, Laura.
Would obviously collaboration is very important, what I just mentioned before, but aggressively transparent is something that every company has to do. Basically, I think with a B impact assessment and becoming a B certified, that's aggressively transparent. But if you look at all the companies that are out there that are being successful, they really make a point in saying whatever is the truth, and that brings loyalty, all these amazing things.
Aggressively transparent. Those are two words that you don't normally hear together, but we're going to come back and revisit that in the next round. Thank you, Laura. Pascal, start, stop, or accelerate?
Start to clearly define in how your business is going to have an impact. What are actually the SDG where you
I think we momentarily just lost.
stop thinking. Oh, sorry. Hello. Are you?
Sorry,
can you hear me?
Yep. We just
Okay,
lost
great.
you momentarily.
Sorry. We should stop thinking. People should stop thinking that doing great and doing impact is part of the compliance. It's a true competitive advantage. I think that's very important. And also in the dynamics of investment, looking at having it more permanent than the purely on a short-term dynamic. And the acceleration is probably not create plans, which sometimes we see in Davos, which are plans that are 5 to 10 years, but plans that are 3 to 6 months ahead.
I was pretty sure you were about to say that we should just get more members into YPO so that we can scale their impact, but I'm glad that you said the last part. Thank you, Pascal.
I wanted to embrace everyone, of course. I understand that not everyone is, I don't want to do too much YPO marketing, but yes, you're right.
Thank you, Pascal. Thomas, what do businesses need to start doing, stop doing, and accelerate? You're on mute, Thomas. Thomas, you're still on mute. Thank you.
If I can start with the stop, I think this COVID-19 thing has actually kind of perhaps brought this to light. Then people should stop thinking that it can be business as usual. In Bart, in his earlier session just now, he mentioned that even the Business Roundtable in the US, they have moved from shareholder primacy to stakeholder to looking after all stakeholders. So I think that's something that everybody should stop thinking that they can carry on and they think that their business will survive. So they have to start thinking about how to survive as a business in the future. And I do run workshops in Singapore to make small and medium enterprises kind of realize that they have to future-proof their business by thinking about the employees of the future. I think Bart also mentioned that earlier on, thinking about customers of the future. And I'm sorry, Bart, you're taking all my points away. And then the third one is funding. Impact investors are now, like you said, 1 in 4, of all investors are impact investors. And then lastly, I thought, compliance and regulations are going to increasingly move towards that direction. So if you don't start thinking about how to continue to operate in the future under new circumstances, then I think you can forget about your business.
Thank you, Thomas. Future-proofing your business, I'm sure all stakeholders and shareholders can understand. And I look forward to attending one of your workshops to finding out how to actually implement it. Bart, start, stop, or accelerate. What do companies need to start doing right away?
So, Nishita, when folks learn about our movement or the broader movement to use business as a force for good and start to investigate the Sustainable Development Goals, I would tell you their first reaction is, I don't know where to start. It overwhelms me. Like, there's just so much information and you get flooded and overwhelmed, and it often can paralyze you. And so I'm going to encourage our audience to do one thing. You can't manage what you don't measure. Measure it. Just begin with measurement. It'll start to illuminate areas that you can focus on to make your business a better business. And there are a lot of tools out there. Obviously, there's our tools, the B Impact Assessment, the SDG Action Manager, but there's also the Global Reporting Initiative and SASB. And like, there are plenty of tools you can use to begin to measure your social and environmental performance. And so it is the first place to start. And trust me, when people take our assessment, Nishita, the first thing that they say always is, you didn't get me quite right. And they're right. You know, ultimately this tool can only be so good. But the second thing they say is, but you know, you illuminated for me all these areas I never really thought about how my business could be a force for good. And it creates a real easy way to begin to manage and create an action plan to take real steps towards behavior change. And so I'd always begin with measurement.
That's a great one, Bart. And it's, you know, it's amazing. We have Pascal, our past international chairman of YPO, and I believe we're almost at 29,000 members. I mean, personally, my personal opinion, wouldn't it be so impactful as these members were renewing their membership, that before they could renew, we would make them take an assessment. And then right away, we would have 29,000 members and we would be able to see where they were, because what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed. And if you could use your forums in YPO as a tool to really help people move along the spectrum to conscious capitalism, that would be a very powerful catalyst. But I can't speak on behalf of YPO. I can just only represent my own opinions, but maybe there are some other people in this room that have a broader influence. So I might have to turn to whoever that might be later. Mergen, I'd like to ask you as well. In your business in Mongolia, what do we need to start, stop, or accelerate?
You know, I was thinking in general, I think the start or accelerate is following our heart and passions. And then stopping non-passions, you know, business ventures where we don't have passion, where we think we're going to make money, business plan looks good, typically loses money, and it's more of a pain to get out of it in the first place anyway. So following your heart, and then think big, accelerate, step on the pedal 100%. You know, it's just this, by having all of you here. I didn't think we were going to have this panel even, and here we are. So we're going to find a way to get this, what we're discussing today, this panel conversation to reach as many people as possible, because I think it is important. I think we as leaders do have a lot we can offer to the world. So please, you know, this itself is an example, I think, of what is possible. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mergen. Bart, this next question is for you. You know, we have audience members here with companies of all sizes. Some of them are employees for small and medium companies, some of them for large ones. What can large companies do, you know, where it's more difficult to shift the culture to start engaging with the business as a force for good movement?
Thanks for asking, Nishita. And it is true that if you look at the history of certainly the B Corp movement, it began with small and medium enterprises, companies that were really innovating in ways to use business to create both change and wealth creation. But what we're seeing right now, Nishita, is really a strong interest from multinationals. We now have about 65 multinationals that are lined up to engage with our movement. And the truth is, the certification is really challenging. It's a very high bar, and it won't be easy for a multinational just to walk in the door and certify. And so we try to create pathways for large companies. And this doesn't apply just to the B Corp movement. It applies to essentially all of the folks who are working on this. And the first thing that I recommend is begin with a single subsidiary. Find a single subsidiary in the organization that might be a little bit more purpose-driven or mission-driven than the others. And we ask them to certify that subsidiary. And that subsidiary acts almost as an intrapreneur inside the organization to spread this idea of using business as a force for good. Other ways we've seen large companies engage is supply chain. And so the same way we were just talking about organizations that can use the impact assessment across a business association. Imagine if you used it, Nishita, across a supply chain, where you said, I've used this tool. It was incredibly helpful to me to figure out how to manage and measure my social and environmental performance. It's free. I encourage you to use it, and perhaps together we can find areas that we both can improve. We've seen the best of the best use it as an educational vehicle where they can find commonalities across their entire supply chain of areas for improvement, and then held webinars or speaker series to try to help their entire supply chain to improve. Now, importantly, this isn't just, again, the right thing to do. That builds a closer tie with your supply chain. It creates greater loyalty and greater commitment. And so it's a win-win. Not only are you doing something for the planet and for communities, but you also are strengthening your own supply chains. The last thing, Nishita, is we do see people using this for investment. They use the tool to evaluate potential acquisitions or investment opportunities. And it's just a way to get your feet in the door here as you start on this journey to use business as a force for good. So subsidiary, supply chain, or investment are easy ways for multinationals to begin to engage with the broader movement of people using business as a force for good.
Wow, Bart, you made that sound so easy, to just find the single little subsidiary in your company that cares a little bit more. I just wanted to ask a really practical, maybe it's not so it sounds very easy, and you made it sound like, it was a very simple process to follow. But really, how do you root out those subsidiaries in a culture that is so embedded in results?
Mm-hmm.
How do you find those people, even if they think it personally, how do you help them find a voice in the broader corporate culture that's accepted and that, this is going to be rewarded? How do you start with that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Nishita. And I think if I reflect on the multinationals that are engaged in our movement and how subsidiaries have emerged as ones for the certification first, I think there's two things that have driven it. One is leadership. And Nishita, if you reflect yourself, you are a business owner and you have many, many subsidiaries. Think about that leader in your organization who is leading its organization with empathy first, with compassion, purpose, and empathy. Leadership will matter here because that individual will imbue the whole organization with that spirit, and it will then transfer to the rest of the organization. So think about a leader, or think about a business activity. You might have, Nishita, a subsidiary that is focused more in the conscious capitalism arena, either in the service they deliver or the product that they create. But start easy. It doesn't need to be this organization in your entire community. It just has to be one where that commitment is authentic. Coming back to authenticity. And so start there, either the leader or it has to do with the business activities of the organization.
That's wonderful. Thank you for breaking that down for us, Bart. Pascal, on the question of leadership, this is something, YPO's mission is to build better leaders. What part, in building better leaders and teaching them about impact and value creation would you like to share with us today?
Well, so you mean the part of the leadership that we have? I'm not sure I understand the question, to be honest.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, I wasn't very clear, to be honest. So, Pascal, I was asking you a broad question about leadership, about impact. How do we imbibe that into our members? What have you seen in leadership in your companies that has really helped to drive impact, because you yourself are the owner of several impactful businesses, but just general leadership skills and traits that we try to pass on in YPO and how we sort of socialize that?
Okay, great. Well, maybe I'll, I'll be very honest and probably even share somehow some of the lessons learned of sometimes failing or doing things I would have done differently as well, implementing impact in my companies or learning. I think at some stages in some project I started as a leader too fast, and the deepness of the work to define the mission, as Bart expressed it very well, and making sure that all stakeholders are truly involved from top to bottom, of course, of the organization, to make sure to curate an ecosystem about the mission internally before communicating to the outside world, because when it's out there, it's too late to catch it back in terms of value. And really making sure that in the leadership, we share all stakeholders. We do have to be careful as leaders that somehow all the employees of the company are embracing the project and listen carefully to each and everyone's to be really ready to go to the battlefield. And I think that's how a product or project can really be successful, is to make sure that all the stakeholders of the companies have been absolutely involved at all levels and all have already defined their mission throughout that and identify themselves to that mission in order to take it out externally. That is, I would say, leadership lessons that I learned. YPO-wise, I've been enormously inspired by how our regions and our businesses are impacting the world at the moment, also in COVID period and beyond COVID. And that's absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Pascal. I'm really, really glad that you shared about perhaps stumbling a little bit as a leader. I think that vulnerability and admitting that you make mistakes is very important to being a positive influencer and having that mindset. Could you just share a little bit maybe about some of that failure or not including all stakeholders and getting everyone involved, or maybe going too fast, and what happened there, if you wouldn't mind?
Well, yeah, I'll be very honest. On some of the projects, we have different companies. One of them is building sustainable results in emerging markets. And we somehow define with the leadership of the company that we would go and start to address learning, English learning through the villages in order to hire locally and focus on learning and hospitality. And at the end of the day, we realized that the expectations somehow and the immediate needs were probably first to provide more help and support to the local clinic, but also to work on waste management. And so rather than to have a holistic approach about and using all the stakeholders from our employees, the local people and the village, we defined a mission because we thought it was somehow driven by the interest of the company, I'll be honest, to hire locally and have people that speak English and are familiar to hospitality skill. And I'll be very honest, we denied some priorities that at the end of the day we're backing up now and going much more into how do we help waste management and the terrible situation of plastic that we currently have on the coast in Myanmar, in occupied area, as well as other important challenges, which are really strong health challenges where we can make a difference. People need to be in good health and in a good environment before learning. And so I'm talking on a micro project of 1,500 people. I'm not the United Nations, but as a business owner, I realized that I should really have spent more time to analyze the different stepstones of the direction that I wanted to take, rather than to embrace one single cause and run with it.
Wow, Pascal, that was just some amazing vulnerability and sharing, because I think so many of us as large business leaders go into something and say, this is the plan, this is what I want to achieve, and this is what we're going to do. And for you to be able to step back and slow down and say, you know what, in order for my project to be successful, we have to first meet the basic needs and before people can embrace learning or any of the other things that you're talking about. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Pascal, because I think even though you think you're not the United Nations, I thought you were, next in line to become the Secretary General, given, the stamps in your passport. Laura, I would love to ask you some questions now. You know, a couple of days ago, you were talking about the caring economy. And during that caring economy talk, you used the words aggressively transparent, which I just sort of jumped out at me because I don't ever think of the word caring and aggressive at the same time. Can you shed a little light on that?
Well, you see, what I truly believe is that if after COVID or during COVID and after COVID, we have come to a understanding that if companies are not truly purposeful and really care for society, because we can't have a society where they're ignoring nature. We can't have a society where we're ignoring the well-being of people. And so the idea is to move towards a more sustainable society. And so to do that, I think one of the key things, given all these issues that are happening about fake news and this and that, and also the fact that so many companies are in the last maybe 10 years, as Bart mentioned, many are going into the green wagon. But you need to really be aggressive and transparent to really engage your employees, engage your customers, but also have that your brand has such a strength that it will drive change and transformation in the world as well. So what I'm saying is we need to change our business models in a big way, because, you know, and only with humility and humanity and authenticity we can do that. But aggressively transparent, as I'm a believer in the B Corps, in the B Impact assessment, that is the most authentic way of transparency. I think that's one path to go towards aggressive transparency, and it has helped me in my company. It took us more than a year to become a B certified company, because we had to go through understanding how we treated our employees, how we treated our environment, how we treated, what was our business model, what was our governance. And then after that, we certified, and, you know, after answering the 200 questions and scoring more than 80. And then after that, I believe we really had to, everything we had and all our employees, that our DNA changed. And basically, when you are aggressively transparent, your employees, your customers, when they buy your product, they know that they are buying something that is making good, that is good for them, but also good for the environment or for the world. So it's a concept that has started with the Body Shop over 40 years ago. She was one of the pioneers, Anita Rodriguez. And basically, I think that I love how she portrayed how now Natura, another amazingly aggressively transparent company, that has actually bought the Body Shop. They're all these companies. The same with Patagonia. Oh my God! The best example is Patagonia. You know, in 2011, they had this ad in the New York Times, a whole page saying, "Do not buy this jacket." And by the way, that fleece jacket was the most that's the one that produced the most sales. So you would think Patagonia is going crazy. They are saying to their customer not to buy that jacket when that's the biggest sales item. Well, because what their message was, we customers world, don't be so, stop being such a consumer. And so what they did is by having this jacket, don't buy this jacket, advertising, they created their sales, they gained in the authenticity, and also market-wise, they really increased their sales. But also the most amazing thing they started was a second-hand industry of highly purposeful brands, that now most of the purposeful brands have this second-hand possibility. So I truly believe that if you want to move forward towards a more purposeful, more authentic, more humane, more authentic it's we need to all be aggressively transparent.
Thank you, Laura. So aggressively transparent. I also heard innovation in there. You know, you have to be innovative in how you're communicating and what message you're trying to spread. So thank you for sharing that, Laura. Thomas, I want to come to you now. Your company, Ganashtim, is an award-winning B Corporation. You are an online education company where 75% of the people you employ are people with disabilities who are so disabled, they're very unlikely to be able to leave their home. And 25% of your workforce are refugees. That is just about the most amazingly diverse workforce that I've ever heard of. Can you share a little bit about how you engage with people with different abilities and how you've managed to create a company that is not only as a business as a force for good, but actually a profitable and impactful one as well?
Okay. Well, it all started when I was invited to join the board of trustees for a computer school for the blind. And this was in 2005, I think it was. And when I saw how a blind person could use the computer and access the internet, it just blew me away. In fact, I had a little competition with this young fellow, and he could find things on the internet faster than I could. So, and then the next step was to say, look, they should be working, because most of them, although they were trained, but they had no jobs. So my stint on the board was to try to put them into employment, and I failed. And then we decided that I'll start the company to hire them, and then we tried to figure out what we're going to do with them. And we thought at that time, you know, e-learning was something that was that we could do, and it's something for the future, and that's how the whole thing started. And you know, disabled people, different forms of disability, have different skills. I mean, you know, person is disabled not entirely. I mean, we have people who are paralyzed from the neck down, but their mind functions very well. And today with technology, they can use voice to activate the computer. And so they can contribute to work. And I like to use the example is that you cannot run a company with 100% accountants in the company, right? Because you will have no revenues. Then you can have a bunch of people counting no beans, right? Bean counters. And conversely, you cannot run a company with 100% salespeople, right? They go and make all promises to customers, and then, you know, they run the company to the ground. So because nobody's looking after the books, you know. So similarly, you know, you have different people with different skill sets, and the job as a leader and a manager is to put their skills to the right use and to combine them into teams where, you know, they are bigger than the sum of the parts, you know. So we have different people doing different kinds of things in the company. Another example is people in the autism spectrum. They have a lot of issues, but the thing that they're very good at is on compliance work. So if there's something that to do with compliance, autistic people are actually very good at it because they're used to routine. Everything has to follow a set routine. And if everything deviates, they scream their head off. And certain things in the company, we want them to scream their head off if things are not being followed, right? So quality assurance, registration stuff and all that, they're good at it. So I could go on and on. I mean, but you look at different people with different skill sets and different abilities, and you combine them together.
That's amazing, Thomas. And I will definitely remember that the next time I have compliance people screaming at me that there might be slightly on the spectrum. And also, my friend Thomas told me that that was true. No, I'm just totally kidding. I will not generalize like that, maybe a little. But the second follow-up question, Thomas, that I really wanted to ask you about, we were discussing a few days ago, is that post-COVID, you think that more people are going to work from home, and that's actually going to intensify competition for what you do. How
Yes.
can you maintain a competitive edge, and how can we include more people from the economy if we wanted to be supportive of what you did? Can we scale this?
Okay, so yeah, we talked about this a couple of days ago, and to be honest, you know, I'm still trying to figure it out because, you know, through the years, I've always been quite transparent and I tell everybody, look, we are almost 100 people in more than 10 countries, and we are 100% remote. We don't have an office anywhere. And I always try to convince people this is the way it can work and all that. But nobody listens. Well, people listen, but they never go about and do it, right? So in a way, we have been, red ocean, blue ocean thing, right? So we have been swimming in our nice little blue ocean and nobody comes in, right? And then suddenly with COVID-19, suddenly look around me, the ocean is getting redder and redder. So people are figuring out that remote work works. And then the next step is that they can then actually hire people remotely. And when they can hire people remotely, they can hire people with all sorts of limitations to commute. And then also, one of the things we do is that we hire these disabled people and other people who are in other marginalized groups, but we hire them mostly from less developed environments. So we don't hire a lot of people in Singapore, for example, Australia. We hire people in the Philippines, in Zimbabwe, in Jamaica, in Macedonia. We even just started hiring in Venezuela, and other companies are going to figure that out because, if somebody is working remotely, whether he's 1 hour's drive away or 10 hours flight away, he can still work for me, right? So in that sense, we have to keep thinking about how we're going to innovate going forward, because I think that we are going to encounter competition. Other companies are going to become as competitive as we are. And also, don't forget, they will compete for our workers because we have trained a whole bunch of them, right? So I think all these things is something that have been on my mind for the last few weeks. And I don't have the answer yet, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm determined to do that.
Thank you, Thomas. I am, as much as you've trained your workforce and there'll be competition for them, I believe that you have built a very purposeful company and given people that wouldn't have otherwise had an opportunity, a chance to really shine. And just from the few months that I've known you, I would be loyal to you, and I would be very surprised if too many of your people jumped ship. In fact, the only thing I can imagine is that, we would empower them to create little mini companies under them, and then you would be sitting on top of an empire of people to do good.
Hopefully.
Maybe that's how we'll scale.
Yeah.
Bart, we were talking earlier, and I wanted to make sure that I had a chance to ask you. You have been talking to tons of world leaders and CEOs post-COVID. Laura mentioned it the other day too, right? And we've all seen it. We saw what the world was before. We have a tremendous opportunity to create something better, right? Why would we just miss this opportunity and totally not take advantage? Can you tell us a little bit about some of those conversations and what you guys are discussing?
Sure. Nishita, I think COVID has been a wake-up call for the planet in a few really important ways. One is that people talk about interdependence, about how the globe is truly an interdependent planet. And I don't know if we've ever seen it in our lifetimes so acutely, where we are all reliant on one another to emerge from this pandemic. And so one is a recognition about the interdependence of society. The second, Nishita, is it's also pretty clear that the economy that we built is producing uneven results for its citizens. And the pandemic has been horrifyingly revealing around that issue, where the chronically underserved populations in our society are being the most affected. And we are now in conversations pretty much on every continent with governmental leaders thinking about what is the economy we want to build as we emerge from the pandemic. And the question you would ask me, Nishita, is what are the industries? Which ones do you see that are really exploding? And the truth is our conversations are more about what all business needs to embrace as they come out of this crisis. And the growing recognition from governmental leaders that organizations that threaten the financial security of their organization through stock buybacks, extraordinary CEO comp, and other practices where when you hit this type of crisis, the only way forward is public assistance. We can't be back here, Nishida. Like this, we can't do this again. It's abundantly clear that we've set up a system where there is only one legal accountability for business. And as people maximize that legal accountability to shareholders, it is leaving an incredible risk for the rest of their stakeholders that we're seeing right now. And so the conversations are about how do we make sure that any company that receives public assistance is legally accountable on the back end to not just their shareholders, but all of society. How do we build incentives into the economic system for those companies that are embracing creating value for not just shareholders, but for their workers in the community and the environment? Like those two pillars, incentive opportunities to drive companies that are thinking with a stakeholder mentality, and then frankly, a requirement for those organizations that mismanaged their organization to this point and now need public assistance. Let's make sure that we don't bail out the airline industry again. Like, let's make sure that we don't, the number of bailouts that are happening across the globe right now, because organizations maximize the wrong thing. They didn't maximize their value to society. They maximized private wealth creation. And we're gonna have to build a different economy, folks. It's just, we are living through a horrifying situation where inequity abounds. And we're all gonna pay for it. We're all gonna pay for it because of our interdependence. And so that's the silver lining, Nishida. That's the opportunity. The opportunity is to truly think, and I loved, Mergen, I loved the name of this summit, Beyond COVID-19. What is Beyond COVID-19? And I really, really want to encourage every person who's listening to this that they cannot return to business as normal. That we have to leave that system behind as we move to what is post-pandemic. And so those have been our conversations, Nishida.
Thank you for sharing that, Bart. I couldn't agree with you more wholeheartedly. Why are we giving bailouts to these massive companies? The airline industry, like let's say in America, was never great to begin with. And to give them hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to save pretty much a sinking tin can, it just doesn't make sense to me, right? As business leaders. And if they're just buying back their own shares to prop up their share price and not maximizing the correct things, there should be conditions. The moment I don't pay somebody on time, I get charged interest. Like they know right away. It almost seems like, you don't do time for like the really big crimes, but it's always the petty ones, right? It's like, okay, I'm gonna pay. I didn't know I took that out of the minibar, right? But never mind, I did like, $500 million of share buybacks with government money. Whew, yeah. I'm a really valuable CEO now. Yeah. It really seems like we're valuing the wrong things, and a bigger spotlight could be put on emphasizing what those right things are. I'd like to open up this question for the entire panel. So anyone, what are things that we could be doing in our areas of influence and impact to shine a bigger light on what are the right things to do? What are some things that we could do coming out of this in our own capacity to highlight those things and not have, CNN with constant negative news? What positive things can we highlight, and what can we as leaders do to start increasing our sphere of influence to be much more positive, to create the change we want to see? Laura, you unmuted first.
Okay, so I think today what matters is employees, is people. I know, so leaders need to really take care of their employees. And so there have been some amazingly selfless leaders that have cut their salaries, really stepped in. So that's one of the things that I encourage all leaders to really come out and become more where their humanity, empathy. We talked about all this authenticity, but where they really focus on how can they help their employees at this point. And not only economically, but also the key thing is reschooling, re-educating. How can they help them reconnect with what matters? Because most probably many companies are, as Bart said, might fail. So then instead of firing them, reignite their purpose and invite them to learn something new and create something that might be socially, environmentally profitable and good for the world. So those two things, selflessness and re-education. But also something very important, I think, that we can do is that, you see, as I said at the very beginning, I truly believe it's so important, the collaboration. Today we are interdependent, as Bart said. We as companies need to connect with civil society. We need to work with them as companies. We need to work with industry enemies or competition, as we call them, enemies at this point, because they're going to have to collaborate, especially all the people that are working on on certain products that are producing some harm to the environment and changing that. But what also, as we said, purpose-driven and thinking intergenerational. This is very important, that companies also think about, I love the name seventh generations, because basically a company has to think not only about themselves, about their quarter, about a year from now, 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, to exist as a company that really creates good. And so all these qualities, as I say, humility, humanity, partnerships, purpose-driven, and intergenerational, are very much qualities that we call female qualities. So we need to include these female qualities into businesses, because all men and women have these female qualities that are about collaboration, care, connection. And that's what I call the care economy, where we are all starting from the government, where their GDP includes caring for caring as a value, like a value for what women are doing at home, family, caring for what nature is, the value of nature in the GDP, as well as companies caring for their employees, because we talked about it today. If we don't care for our employees, we'll go nowhere. They will lose loyalty and engagement and so forth. So all these things are key for moving forward and stop this old tradition of what Bart said, so shareholder value, and moving towards a stakeholder value, where every decision a company makes includes a vision of what happens to the employees, to the supply chain, to the customers, to the investors, to nature, and so forth. So that's the holistic approach that I think that every company should embrace.
Thank you, Laura. I think you did all of that in one breath, because I was holding my breath, waiting for you. I was like, oh my God, I hope I'm going to get everything. I mean, so yes. So Laura, all encompassing, be transparent, think about it multi-generationally. I saw Pascal laughing, smiling, nodding as you were talking about some of these female qualities. Not just
in a very positive smile, by the way, because I think it's great. I love to listen to that. And YPO, we've been, as you know, strong advocate on diversity. And we see our board being much more efficient without blind spot by having much more women at the board. So I think it's true. The world would be a much better place if there were much more women at the leadership. And that's crystal clear.
Well, thank you, Pascal, for not only believing that, but for modeling that at the very highest levels of, one of the world's best leadership organizations, and for being a big proponent of that. What I was actually giggling about internally is earlier, or late last year, actually, you were in Bangkok for a Dragonfly Women's Empowerment Summit. Pascal makes time for everybody. If you talk about caring and caring for the people that he serves, Pascal is a true example of a wonderful servant leader. He showed up in Bangkok in the middle of his travel schedule. He had his daughter with him, and he was so keen that his daughter would see that her dad really cares about women. But she was more concerned about getting back to Belgium to hang out with her friends. So she didn't actually make it. So this poor guy spent, hours crafting his message, hoping his daughter would catch it. And the panel was on toxic masculinity. And he was really trying to demonstrate to her that that's not your dad. Your dad is actually trying to, change the world before you have to deal with the real world. So I give Pascal a lot of credit for being a big proponent of that and for bringing more women into leadership in YPO and for saying such nice things about the value of that diversity. But on this very panel, he did share that there were some leadership traits that some men had and that women had. And in order to be truly effective, how would you say that we should kind of balance those energies to really have extraordinary results? Pascal, how do you manage that?
Well, I'm not managing anything. I'm just experiencing it, right? I've just realized that by having the chance and the opportunity to be surrounded by people that were more brilliant than what I was trying to create and much more diverse. A diverse board in all companies is a board that will achieve much more than a non-diverse board because you don't miss those blind spots. And that is absolutely amazing to realize, whoa, we wouldn't have seen it. And that's just the best experience that I had having the chance to have the board being diverse.
Thank you for sharing that, Pascal. Thomas, I'd love to hear from you. What can we do to shine a bigger spotlight on some of the things that the world needs to do right away?
Well, I mean, I after so many years being in the B Corp community, increasingly, I feel that the whole impact assessment, the way it's crafted, it really gives every business a map for a journey. And in fact, I think Bart mentioned earlier that in January, they've also launched the SDG Action Manager jointly with UN Global Compact. And I think that's really brilliant because the difference between SDG Action Manager and the B Impact Assessment is that SDG Manager is just for a self-use. It doesn't lead to any certification or anything. And very often we try to tell people that don't worry about the certification, do the assessment as a tool to guide your company. And now they've got this SDG Action Manager where you can just try to adopt a couple of SDGs and then build on that. And that's a very good starting point. And then you can actually then continue a journey into the impact assessment. And this thing covers all the 17 SDGs. There are 17, right?
Yeah.
And also, I mean, the whole thing about the B impact assessment is on on 5 pillars. It's about governance, it's about employees, it's about environment, it's about customers and community. So it's a very holistic approach. It's not just a green movement. It's not just about anti-slavery and what have you. It's a very holistic thing. And as a company, you may not be able to do well in everything, but you can do well in certain things. And I think that that's a good way to show the business world that you can get started by just looking through mapping yourself against this assessment. So I hope I'm not overly trying to do a sales job, but I really truly believe that I've been looking for all different tools. I just feel that this is a very good a way forward for anybody.
Thomas, the world could accuse you of many things, but being a salesperson to sell anything is not one of them. In fact, the way you position and frame things, it's like, this is for me. You may not be as evolved, but you could start here. It actually really invites people to want to try it. So no, I didn't really feel it as a sales pitch. I saw it more as a tool to really help that awakening. Bart, I saw you unmute yourself, so I saw you, maybe you could add something to this.
No, just to reinforce it. Importantly, the reason why it's not a sales tool is because we don't get anything from it. This is a free tool, folks. It is a public good. There is no benefit to our to B Lab. There is no economic connection for Thomas or for me or for anybody. It's genuinely there to try to advance the common good. And so it's completely confidential, and embedded in it are not only best practice guides, but easy benchmarking. And so use it. 100,000 plus others have already used it. And we're not the only ones. I really do want to emphasize that this is a much broader movement than just the B Corp movement. There are hundreds of NGOs and truthfully closing in on 1 million businesses that are all working towards this broader goal of trying to build a different type of economy. And so whether it be the B Impact Assessment or the Global Reporting Initiative or a SASB, like there are dozens of tools. There are tools that are particular to industries that all can begin you on this journey. And that's what I think you're hearing from the entire panel, is just start. You know, just start. You have to recognize it's a journey and celebrate each step rather than trying to view it as a destination. Because we got a long ways, folks, to the destination of a more inclusive and regenerative economy. That's going to take some time, but we all got to get going.
Thank you, Bart. I completely agree with you. It's absolutely a journey. I wanted to ask you something. If it was also confidential, and given that the world, so much of the world, the younger generation especially, who really do have, will have a very large impact on how things play out, they're all on social media. If there was a way for them to use these tools or encourage, you know, but it was gamified. So instead of being so confidential, but people could see how well you were doing. Do you see that? How do you view that? Do you think that's possible?
I do think it's possible. We've been working on it for a while, Nishita. It is, for an old guy like me, it's harder than it sounds. And so we're making steady progress on it. And the great news is that I'm not leading that effort, that we do have a team of young folks who are trying to take the tool. And the truth is the SDG Action Manager is a bit of that, right? It segments the entire assessment down to individual SDGs and gives you quick scores as you're coming out of the background. And you can use those scores. You can publish them. You can tell people how you're doing. And so all of that is a way to try to build this type of broader movement. So you're spot on, Nishita, and we're getting there. It's going to take a little time.
Well, guys, I just got a little message from Mergen, our conference organizer, that time is up. I know we were not dancing or listening to music because that's acceptable to be late, but we were talking about very important global things. I want to thank you all for this amazing opportunity to get to know you all better and for sharing so authentically and transparently and teaching us what kind of mindset we need to really get us through, and for giving us some practical tool sets that we can use. I'm going to turn it over to Mergen. He's great at wrapping these things up. He was built for moderation. Thank you once again, everyone.
Thank you, Nishita. Great. Laura, do you have a final word?
Yeah, just a small little thing. That's something that I've learned through YPO that has been an amazing tool as a business that has now trained more than 250,000 people. It's called a methodology called non-flict, the art of everyday peacemaking. I truly believe that if there's one thing that the business leaders need to learn is to become mentors and conflict resolution seekers, meaning transform a conflict into non-flict or a conflict into an opportunity for growth.
Thank you, Laura. So let's make sure we get some resources to our attendees. So Nishita, thank you so much for a great job moderating, a lot of great questions. I mean, amazing work being done by everybody. Thomas, what a incredible, I mean, no wonder you won the award multiple times. There's just no way to compete with that. But I mean, just amazing. Maybe we can replicate that and maybe accelerate the impact. You know, I just want to say, like, you know, 4 days, 3 to 4 hours a day of content, you know, 30 to 40 global business leaders speaking every day. We have like 15 hours of amazing content. So a lot of connections, more than 50 virtual exhibitors, you know, connecting. Many of the exhibitors offering free offers for attendees to help each other out. So just a lot of love and a lot of support a lot of connecting, as Laura said, partnerships during these times. So I guess my biggest thought is, parting thought is, how do we accelerate impact? Per Nishita's question, how do we accelerate what we're doing? So how can we create a better world? What can we do? What can you do? What can I do? Or better yet, what can we do together? So let's end with that, and we can have abundance mindset in terms of everything is possible, but also have a sustainable mindset in terms of we are one. We have one planet. Let's make world a better place. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Mergen.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh,
Bye, everybody.
we should do a Photoshop
Okay.
or a screenshot. Okay, so smile. Okay, cheese.
Where is the dancing after this?
Yeah, no, you gotta go back and watch that. I don't know if I can do that. But yeah, Jerry Wanda, he's got everybody dancing, so that was amazing. So
Okay.
yeah, that's one thing we're thinking of coming up. Mongolia Music Festival. Bring Mongolia to the world. So
Okay.
anyway, thank you so much. Have a
Yeah.
great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Well done again.
Thank you, Nishita.
very
Thank
much.
you, Morgan.
Bye. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Nishita. Thank you.